The nightmare always started the same way. Snow falling on Black Pine Forest. 40 warriors moving through trees that whispered promises of death. General Marcus Voss at the front, hand raised in signal, eyes scanning the ridge ahead. Then the arrows. Hundreds of them, black shafts cutting through white snow like judgment itself. The screams came next. Always the screams. And then the shadow wolves, creatures that should not exist, tearing through his pack with claws made of darkness and hunger. Garrett Ironhold woke with a growl trapped in his throat, 58 years old, and still drowning in memories, 8 years dead. His chambers were dark, except for dying embers in the massive stone fireplace. Cold sweat soaked through his shirt. His left knee throbbed where a shadow wolf's claws had shredded muscle and bone, the wound refusing to heal properly, even with his alpha regeneration. Some scars went deeper than flesh. Some marked the soul. He sat up slowly, every joint protesting. The bottle of whiskey on the table called to him like an old friend. He ignored it. Dawn was coming. The fortress needed its alpha, even if that alpha was a broken thing held together by duty and guilt. Outside, the northern mountains stretched endlessly under a sky just beginning to pale. Iron Ridge Fortress perched on the highest peak, black stone walls rising from living rock like the mountain's teeth. 200 years old, built by the first Ironhold Alpha to hold this pass against the darkness that crept from the Shadowlands beyond. Now it held 80 warriors and one weary king against forces that should have been legend. Garrett walked to the window, his bad knees screaming with each step. Below in the courtyard, the early watch changed shifts. Warriors in black armor, the silver wolf crest gleaming on their chests. His pack, his responsibility. 40 had died at Black Pine because he trusted the wrong person. He would not fail these. The wolf stirred inside him, restless and angry. It always was. 8 years since he had allowed himself to shift fully, since he had run the mountains in wolf form and remembered what freedom felt like. The wolf was part of the curse and the blessing. Alpha blood meant strength, speed, healing that made him nearly immortal. It also meant the weight of every pack member's life pressed against his chest like stones. A knock at the door pulled him from dark thoughts. His second, Lieutenant Caius Thorne, entered without waiting for permission. The young wolf knew better than to wake an alpha from nightmares, but dawn brought duties that could not wait. "My lord," Caius's voice was carefully neutral. "The selection messenger has arrived from the capital. The conclave has chosen this year's warden." Garrett's jaw tightened. The warden selection. Every year, the same cursed ritual. Every year, another woman sent to Iron Ridge Fortress to sustain the barrier that kept shadow wolves and dark things from overrunning the kingdom. Every year, they lasted between 6 months and 2 years before the bond consumed them. 43 wardens in 200 years. 43 women who came to the fortress and never left. They called it honor. Garrett called it murder. Who did they choose? His voice came out rougher than intended, the wolf growling beneath the words. Caius hesitated. "That is the unusual part, my lord. They chose Elena Voss, the widow." The name hit like a blade between ribs. Elena Voss, Marcus's wife, the woman who had spent 8 years hating Garrett for surviving when her husband did not. The woman who had every right to that hatred. "That is impossible. She is too old. The selection always takes women between 18 and 25. Elena is 52. The messenger says the conclave's oracle identified her bloodline as compatible. Something about her connection to previous wardens through her maternal line." Caius shifted uncomfortably. "My lord, there is more. She refused the selection. They are bringing her by force." "Of course she refused." Garrett turned back to the window, watching the sun break over distant peaks. Elena Voss was brilliant, stubborn, and had dedicated the last 8 years to investigating her husband's death. She ran the kingdom's largest medical academy and had no patience for politics or prophecy. The idea of her being dragged to Iron Ridge as a sacrificial bride would make her incandescent with rage, which meant this would be a disaster. "When does she arrive?" "Within the hour, my lord. The messenger requests your presence in the Great Hall for the binding ceremony." Garrett wanted to refuse. Wanted to tell the conclave to send their warden back to the capital and find some other way to sustain the barrier. But there was no other way. 200 years of alphas had tried. The barrier required an alpha's power channeled through a warden's bloodline. Without it, The Shadowlands consumed everything. He had lost 40 warriors at Blackpine to shadow wolves that should not have breached the barrier. If the barrier failed completely, the entire kingdom died. Inform the messenger I will attend. Garrett's voice carried the weight of command and resignation in equal measure. And Caius? Make sure the warriors know this warden is to be treated with respect. No assumptions, no traditions she has not agreed to. Is that clear? Caius blinked in surprise. Most alphas treated wardens as tools, necessary sacrifices for the greater good. But Caius had served Garrett long enough to know his alpha was different. Yes, my lord, I will inform the pack. When Caius left, Garrett allowed himself a moment of weakness. He pressed his forehead against the cold stone window and let the wolf inside him keen with grief. Elena Voss. Of all the women in the kingdom, the conclave chose the one who had the most reason to hate him, the one whose husband he had failed to protect, the one who would see this as the final insult. He did not blame her. He blamed himself every day. An hour later, Garrett stood in the great hall as the selection procession arrived. The hall was ancient stone and burning torches, banners bearing the silver wolf hanging from vaulted ceilings. His warriors lined the walls in formal armor, silent and watchful. At the hall's far end, the binding circle was carved into the floor, runes that glowed faintly with old magic. The massive oak doors opened. 6 conclave guards entered first, wearing the white and gold of the capital. Then the High Seer, an ancient woman whose eyes had gone milk-white from staring into prophecies. And between them, held by iron manacles that suppressed her ability to resist, walked Elena Voss. She looked exactly as Garrett remembered from Marcus's funeral 8 years ago. Gray-streaked brown hair pulled back severely, sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. Tall and strong rather than delicate. But now those eyes burned with fury that made the torches seem dim by comparison. Her gaze found Garrett across the hall and locked. The hatred there was a physical thing, cold and absolute. I will not be your warden. Her voice rang out before the High Seer could begin the ceremony. I will not participate in this barbaric ritual. I will not be another woman sacrificed to sustain an alpha's power. The hall went silent. Warriors shifted uncomfortably. Alphas did not tolerate defiance, especially not from potential wardens. The High Seer's expression went cold. You do not have a choice, child. The Oracle has spoken. Your bloodline is compatible. The barrier weakens daily. Without a warden bond, Iron Ridge falls. When Iron Ridge falls, the Shadowlands consume the kingdom. Your personal wishes are irrelevant. Then let it fall. Elena's voice stayed steady despite the manacles. I will not help perpetuate a system that murders women for convenience. Find another way. There is no other way. The seer turned to Garrett. Alpha Ironhold, will you accept this warden and forge the bond? This was the moment. Garrett could accept, force the bond despite Elena's resistance, and have another warden to sustain the barrier for however long she lasted. It was his duty, his responsibility. What every alpha before him had done. He looked at Elena, saw the fear beneath her fury, saw the stubborn courage that had made Marcus love her, saw a woman who deserved better than being a tool. Number. Garrett's voice carried absolute authority. I will not force a bond on an unwilling woman. If Elena Voss chooses to refuse, that is her right. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. The High Seer's face went purple with rage. My lord, you cannot refuse the selection. The barrier needs a warden. Then the conclave can find a willing volunteer. Garrett stepped down from the dais, moving toward Elena with deliberate calm. I will not add another unwilling sacrifice to Iron Ridge's walls. He stopped 3 paces from her. Up close, he could see the exhaustion around her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly from whatever sedatives they had given her to transport her here. She met his gaze without flinching. You should not have survived Blackpine. Her words were quiet, meant only for him. My husband trusted you. 40 good warriors trusted you. They all died. You should have died with them. I know. Garrett did not look away. I carry that failure every day, and I will not compound it by forcing you into a bond you did not choose. Something flickered in Elena's eyes. Confusion, perhaps, or the beginning of a question she had not expected to ask. The High Seer stepped forward, her staff striking the stone floor with a sharp crack. Alpha Ironhold, I must remind you that without a warden, the barrier protecting this fortress will fail within a fortnight. Shadow wolves will overrun your position. Your warriors will die. The kingdom will fall, all because you refuse to do your duty. Garrett turned to face her, and for a moment the wolf showed in his eyes, golden and dangerous. My duty is to protect those who cannot protect themselves. That includes protecting women from being used against their will. If the barrier fails, we will find another way to hold, but I will not take what is not freely given. The seer looked like she might argue further, but something in Garrett's expression made her reconsider. She turned sharply to the guards. Remove the prisoner's restraints. If she will not bond willingly, there is no point in keeping her here. Return her to the capital. Wait! Elena's voice cut through the tension. She looked at Garrett with an expression he could not read. You are truly refusing? You would let your fortress fall rather than force me? Yes. Why? The question was genuine. What alpha refuses power when it is offered? Because power taken by force is not worth having. Garrett met her gaze steadily. And because Marcus would never forgive me if I harmed his wife to save my own skin. Marcus is dead. Elena's voice cracked slightly. You made sure of that. The words were designed to wound, and they did. But Garrett did not flinch. You are right. Which is why the least I can do is honor his memory by treating you as he would have wanted. With respect, with choice, even if that choice dooms me. Elena stared at him for a long moment. The hall had gone silent again, every warrior watching this exchange with fascination. Finally, she spoke. Remove the manacles. If I am being given a choice, I should be free to make it. The conclave guards looked to the high seer, who nodded curtly. They removed the iron restraints. Elena rubbed her wrists, red marks already fading. She turned to Garrett. I want to see the previous wardens. All of them. Where they lived, how they died. Everything this fortress is hiding. Then I will decide. Garrett inclined his head. You have my word. I will show you everything. No secrets, no lies. And if you still choose to leave, I will provide escort back to the capital myself. The high seer made a sound of disgust. You are a fool, Alpha Ironhold. Your sentiment will doom us all. Perhaps. Garrett did not take his eyes off Elena. But at least I will die knowing I gave someone a choice. Elena studied him like a puzzle she could not solve. Finally, she nodded once. Show me. The fortress was a study in controlled chaos. Warriors training in the courtyard, their movements enhanced by wolf speed and strength. Blacksmiths forging weapons in furnaces that burned hotter than any natural fire. Healers in the medical wing treating injuries that would kill normal men, but that wolf regeneration could mend. And everywhere, the sense of barely contained violence. This was not a palace. It was a war camp that had stood for 2 centuries. Garrett led Elena through it all, Caius following at a respectful distance. She said nothing, but her eyes catalogued everything. The scorch marks on the walls where shadow magic had struck, the memorial stones bearing names of fallen warriors, the weapons racks that should have held more blades than they did. Your supplies are low. Elena's first words in 20 minutes were an observation, not a question. Yes, Garrett did not see the point in lying. The capital sends what they can spare, but most resources go to the southern armies. We make do. By sending warriors to fight with inadequate equipment? She gestured to a young soldier sharpening a notched sword. That blade is 3 repairs past useful. It will break in combat. Probably, but new steel costs coin we do not have. Elena's expression hardened. So the capital sends you women to sacrifice, but not enough weapons to defend them. How noble. They reached the Warden Tower, a separate structure connected to the main fortress by a covered bridge. The tower was smaller than the main keep, but beautifully constructed, with windows facing east to catch the sunrise. A place designed to be both prison and sanctuary. The Wardens lived here. Garrett gestured to the entrance. Each had her own chambers, her own space. We tried to make it as comfortable as possible. How generous. To give your sacrifices comfortable cells. They were not prisoners. Garrett's voice stayed level. They could move freely through the fortress, train with the warriors if they wished, leave the grounds as long as they stayed within the barrier's range. We did not keep them locked away. Elena looked at him sharply. Then why did they stay? Because the bond requires proximity. Once forged, the Warden and Alpha must remain within a certain distance, or the barrier collapses. Moving beyond that range causes pain to both parties. Increasing pain the longer the separation lasts. Eventually, fatal. So they were prisoners, just well-treated ones. Garrett did not argue the point. He led her inside the tower. The lower floors held sitting rooms and libraries, spaces designed for comfort. The upper floors held individual chambers, each one decorated differently based on the warden who had lived there. 43 women in 200 years. Elena moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching furniture, examining personal items left behind. Some of these chambers looked barely used. How long did they last? It varies. Garrett kept his voice neutral, stating facts without emotion. The bond sustains the barrier, but it feeds on the warden's life force. Some women were strong enough to last years, others, months. The shortest was 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Elena turned to face him. You bonded with a woman and she died in 3 weeks. The bond was not compatible. Sometimes the bloodlines do not match as well as the oracles predict. The drain is too fast. Garrett's jaw tightened. Her name was Sarah. She was 19. She should have lived. And the others? How many have you bonded with personally? 7. In the 15 years I have been Alpha of Iron Ridge. 7 women dead in 15 years. Elena's voice could have cut glass. And you wonder why I do not want to be the 8th. I do not wonder. Garrett met her eyes. I would refuse too in your position. This system is monstrous. But it is the only system we have. Then build a better one. Her voice rose slightly. You are the Alpha. You have power. Use it to find another way. I have tried. Every day for 15 years. There are no old texts I have not read. No magical theory I have not studied. No alternative I have not explored. The bond is the only thing that sustains the barrier. Without it, the Shadowlands consume everything. Elena was quiet for a moment, studying him with those sharp gray eyes. You really believe that? You are not just justifying the system. You truly think there is no other way. I know there is no other way. I have watched good women die trying to find one. Then you are not trying hard enough. Elena turned away, moving to the window that overlooked the courtyard below. Marcus used to say the best commanders were the ones who refused to accept impossible situations, who found third options when given only 2 choices. Marcus was right. Garrett's voice softened. He was the best tactical mind I ever knew, and I failed him at Blackpine because I accepted someone else's intelligence instead of questioning it. Elena went very still. What do you mean? The attack at Blackpine should never have happened. Garrett moved to stand beside her at the window, careful to maintain respectful distance. We were told it would be a routine patrol, light enemy presence, standard reconnaissance. The intelligence came from a trusted source in the capital, Counselor Haven. Elena's voice was barely above a whisper. Marcus wrote to me 2 weeks before he died. Said he did not trust Haven. Said the man was too interested in Iron Ridge's defenses. Too many questions about the barrier and the Wardens. Garrett turned to look at her. I did not know that. I have been investigating for 8 years. Elena's hands gripped the window ledge, gathering evidence, following paper trails. Haven has been diverting supplies meant for Iron Ridge, selling weapons to raiders, creating conditions for the barrier to fail. I just could not prove why. Because if Iron Ridge falls, the Shadowlands spread, and shadow magic is profitable to those who know how to harness it. Garrett felt pieces clicking into place. Haven has been sabotaging the barrier deliberately, to profit from the chaos. Elena nodded. And now he has me here, the woman who has been investigating him, sent to bond with an Alpha and conveniently die within a year. Very neat. They both fell silent, the implication hanging between them. This was not just about the selection. This was an assassination disguised as duty. We need to talk to the High Seer. Elena turned from the window. Find out how much she knows. If Haven influenced the selection, if he paid the Oracle to choose me specifically. The horn sounded from the walls. 3 long blasts. Raiders. Garrett was moving before the echo faded, his wolf instincts taking over. Caius appeared at the tower entrance, already armored. Shadow wolves at the eastern approach, my lord. At least 20. And something else. Something the scouts could not identify. Garrett's blood went cold. Shadow wolves this far inside the barrier meant it was failing faster than he thought. Get the warriors to defensive positions. Archers on the walls. Melee fighters ready at the gate. We hold them at the perimeter. My lord, without a warden bond, our barrier is at minimum strength. If they breach the walls, Caius did not need to finish. They both knew what happened when shadow wolves got inside a fortress. Then we do not let them breach. Garrett turned to Elena. You need to get to the keep. The inner chambers are reinforced with silver and iron. Shadow creatures cannot pass those thresholds. Number. Elena's voice was firm. I am a surgeon. I have treated battle wounds for 20 years. Your warriors will need medical care. I stay in the medical wing. Elena, this is not a normal battle. Shadow wolves do not wound. They kill or they are killed. You cannot help the dead. Then I will help the living. She met his gaze without flinching. I did not accept your bond, but I will not hide while your warriors fight. Show me to the medical supplies. Garrett wanted to argue, wanted to order her to safety, but the stubborn set of her jaw reminded him so much of Marcus that his throat tightened. Caius will show you. He turned to his second. Give her access to anything she needs. And Caius, keep her alive. The young lieutenant nodded and gestured for Elena to follow. She moved toward the door but paused, looking back at Garrett. Try not to die, Alpha. I have not decided if I hate you yet. Then she was gone, leaving Garrett alone in a tower full of ghosts. He allowed himself one moment to appreciate the irony. 8 years ago, he came back from Black Pine alive while Marcus died. Now Marcus's widow was here, surrounded by death, and Garrett was about to go fight creatures that fed on souls. The universe had a dark sense of humor. He made his way to the armory, moving with the kind of controlled speed that came from decades of practice. Warriors nodded as he passed, their movements efficient and practiced. They knew what shadow wolves meant, knew the casualty rates, but they stood ready anyway because that was what pack meant. In the armory, Garrett stripped off his civilian clothes and donned battle armor. Black steel plates inscribed with runes of warding, designed to deflect shadow magic. Not perfectly. Nothing deflected it perfectly. But enough to give a warrior a fighting chance. He strapped on his sword, a blade forged 200 years ago by the first Ironhold Alpha. The steel was mixed with silver from the barrier itself, giving it the ability to cut shadow flesh. Then the secondary blades, knives positioned for quick access. Finally, his wolf claws, extending naturally from his fingertips as he let the beast rise closer to the surface. By the time he reached the walls, his warriors were in position. Archers with arrows blessed by whatever priests still remembered the old rituals. Spearmen behind them, ready for close combat. And at the gate, the heavy assault team, warriors who would meet shadow wolves head-on with claw and fang and steel. Garrett took his position at the center of the east wall. From here, he could see the valley below. And there, emerging from the tree line like nightmares given form, came the shadow wolves. They were wrong in every way that mattered. Too large, the size of horses. Too dark, their fur absorbing light rather than reflecting it. And their eyes, burning red coals that promised death and worse. Behind them, coordinating the attack with gestures and commands, stood figures in black robes. Raiders who had learned to harness shadow magic, who had made pacts with things that should have stayed buried. Archers! Garrett's voice carried across the wall. Aim for the handlers. The wolves are harder to kill, but they need direction. Cut off the head and the body thrashes blind. Arrows flew. Some found targets, raiders falling with shafts through throats and hearts. But others missed, deflected by shields of shadow that rose like smoke. And the wolves kept coming, faster now, closing the distance with impossible speed. Oil barrels, Garrett commanded. Fire on my mark. Warriors rolled barrels of pitch to the wall's edge, waited. The wolves were 50 yards away, 40, 30. Now, fire bloomed as the barrels tipped and torches followed. Shadow wolves screamed as flames caught their fur, the sound like metal scraping glass. 3 fell, burning. But more leaped through the fire, their momentum carrying them to the wall's base. Brace for impact! The first wolf hit the gate with force that shook the entire fortress. Wood cracked, but held. The second and third struck the walls themselves, trying to climb, their claws digging into ancient stone. And one, larger than the others, simply leaped. Impossible height, clearing the 20-foot wall in a single bound and landing in the courtyard beyond. Containment team, breach in courtyard! Garrett vaulted over the parapet, his wolf strength turning the 20-foot drop into a controlled landing. He hit the stones in a crouch, already moving toward the shadow wolf that was tearing through his warriors like they were made of paper. The beast turned toward him, red eyes focusing with terrible intelligence. It was not just a creature. It was directed, enhanced. Someone had fed this wolf power beyond what shadow magic normally granted. Garrett met it head-on. His sword came up as the wolf lunged, jaws wide enough to swallow a man whole. Steel met shadow flesh with a sound like thunder. The blade bit deep, cutting through muscle and bone. But instead of blood, shadow smoke poured from the wound. The wolf twisted, impossibly fast, and its claws raked across Garrett's side. Pain exploded through his ribs despite the armor. He felt skin tear, felt the poison of shadow magic entering his bloodstream. His regeneration fought it immediately, but this was strong. Stronger than any shadow wound he had taken before. He rolled away from the second strike, came up inside the wolf's guard, and drove his sword up through its chest toward where a heart should be. The blade struck something solid, something that pulsed with power. He twisted, putting all his alpha strength behind the motion. The wolf exploded. Not died. Exploded. Shadow smoke filled the courtyard, blinding everyone for 3 heartbeats. When it cleared, the wolf was gone. Only a pool of darkness remained, already evaporating in the torchlight. Garrett staggered, his side bleeding despite accelerated healing. Around him, his warriors were finishing off the remaining wolves. The battle was ending. They had held. Casualties? His voice came out rougher than intended, the poison fighting his regeneration. Caius appeared, his own armor scored with claw marks. 6 dead, my lord, 14 wounded. The medical wing is already treating them. And the breach? We held. The gate is damaged but functional. We can repair it before nightfall. Garrett nodded, then his knee gave out. Caius caught him before he hit the ground. My lord, you are poisoned. We need to get you to the healers. Number. Garrett forced himself upright, using his sword as a cane. Check the fallen. Make sure no shadow essence remains. Then double the watch. That attack was coordinated. They will try again. My lord, you can barely stand. I can stand well enough. Garrett's voice carried the snap of command. Do as I ordered, Lieutenant. Caius saluted and moved to obey, but his expression said clearly that this argument was not over. Garrett did not care. He made his way toward the medical wing, each step sending fire through his poisoned wounds. The medical wing was controlled chaos. Wounded warriors on cots, Elena moving between them with practiced efficiency. Her hands were covered in blood, her expression focused with the kind of concentration that came from years of battlefield surgery. She did not look up as Garrett entered, too busy saving a warrior whose throat had been opened by shadow claws. You. She gestured to a clean cot without looking. Sit. I will be with you when I finish keeping this boy from bleeding out. I am fine. The words came out weaker than intended. You are bleeding shadow poison and about to collapse. Sit before I have to treat 2 patients instead of 1. Garrett sat, partly because she was right, partly because watching her work was mesmerizing. She moved like a dancer, every motion precise, no wasted energy. Herbs selected without looking, sutures placed with perfect spacing. Commands to her assistants delivered in a calm voice that made urgency sound routine. She saved the warrior, bound his wounds with silver-threaded bandages that would prevent shadow corruption, made sure he was stable before moving on to the next patient. She worked through 14 wounded warriors before she reached Garrett. By then, his side had stopped bleeding, but the poison had spread. He could feel it in his veins, fighting his wolf nature, trying to corrupt him from within. Elena did not waste time on preliminaries. She cut away his damaged armor with shears that should not have been able to cut steel but did anyway. Examined the claw marks with hands that were gentle despite their efficiency. Deep. The poison is in your bloodstream. Your regeneration is fighting it but not winning. She looked up, meeting his eyes. How long have you been wounded? 20 minutes, maybe less. You should be dead in 20 minutes with this much shadow toxin. Elena's voice carried grudging respect. Your alpha healing is keeping you alive, but it will not last without help. She pulled supplies from shelves with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where everything was, despite this being her first day in this medical wing. Silvered herbs, compounds that smelled sharp and clean, and a vial of something that glowed faintly blue. This will hurt. She uncorked the vial. Shadow poison requires aggressive treatment. Your healing will make it worse because it will fight the medicine as much as the poison. I have had worse. No, you have not. Trust me. She poured the glowing liquid directly into his wound. Garrett's world exploded into white-hot agony. The poison fought, his regeneration fought, the medicine fought both. For 5 seconds that felt like hours, his body was a battlefield, and he could not tell who was winning. Then it stopped. The poison burned away. The wound started closing, his regeneration finally able to do its work without fighting corruption. His breathing steadied. Elena watched him with clinical detachment. You did not scream. Most alphas scream. Most alphas are not used to pain, or you are just more stubborn than most. She bandaged the wound despite it already healing. Keep this on for 6 hours. Let your body finish processing the remnants of poison. Do not shift. Do not fight. Do not do anything except rest. I am needed on the walls. You are needed alive. Elena's voice went firm. Those warriors out there need their alpha functional, not collapsing from poison because you are too proud to rest. 6 hours. Then you can go back to being invincible. Garrett wanted to argue, but she was right. And more than that, she was treating him not as alpha, but as patient. It was refreshing in its bluntness. 6 hours, then I returned to duty. Agreed. She moved to check on another patient, then paused. You fought well, Alpha. Your warriors are lucky to have you. The words were simple, professional. But coming from Marcus Voss's widow, they carried weight Garrett had not expected. Thank you. For treating the wounded, for staying when you could have fled to safety. I am a surgeon. We do not flee. Elena's voice softened slightly. And despite everything, I do not wish to see good people die. Not even yours. She walked away before he could respond, already focused on the next patient. Garrett watched her work and understood why Marcus had loved her. She was steel-wrapped in competence, fury tempered by compassion. Dangerous and brilliant in equal measure. If she agreed to the Warden bond, she would be extraordinary, and it would kill her the same way it killed all the others. That was unacceptable. 6 hours later, true to his word, Garrett returned to the walls. His wound had healed completely, only a faint scar remaining where shadow claws had tried to tear out his heart. The poison was gone, purged by Elena's medicine and his own regeneration working in harmony. The fortress had repaired what it could. The gate was reinforced with additional iron bars, the courtyard scrubbed clean of shadow residue, the dead given proper rites, their names added to the memorial stones. 6 warriors who had died protecting the barrier, 6 names Garrett would carry with Marcus's 40. He found Elena in the Warden Tower, standing in one of the upper chambers that had belonged to a woman named Sarah, the 19-year-old who lasted 3 weeks. Elena did not turn when Garrett entered. She was looking at a journal left open on the desk, reading entries written in a young woman's handwriting. She knew she was dying. Elena's voice was quiet. These entries, she chronicles the bond draining her, day by day. How tired she felt, how her magic was being consumed. She knew, and she stayed anyway, because the barrier had to be maintained. Garrett moved to stand beside her. Sarah understood the mathematics. Her life for thousands of others. She made the choice. She was 19. She should have had a lifetime of choices. Yes, she should have. Garrett did not try to justify it. The system is wrong. It has always been wrong. But it is the system we have. Elena closed the journal gently. I have made my decision, Alpha Ironhold. Garrett's chest tightened. Whatever you choose, I will honor it. She turned to face him fully. I will become your warden. I will forge the bond and sustain your barrier. Before relief could overwhelm him, she continued. But not as a sacrifice, not as another woman giving her life to perpetuate this system. I will bond with you on one condition. Name it. We find another way. Together. You said you have tried for 15 years to break this curse. I have been investigating shadow magic and barrier theory for 8. We pool our knowledge. We work together. And we find a way to sustain the barrier without requiring a warden to burn her life away. Garrett met her eyes and saw not resignation, but determination. This was not surrender. This was a tactical alliance, a partnership entered with clear goals and defined terms. If we fail, if there is truly no other way, then I die knowing I tried to change an unjust system instead of just accepting it. Elena held out her hand. Do we have an accord, Alpha? Garrett took her hand. Her grip was strong, a surgeon's precision matched with a warrior's commitment. We have an accord. He paused. But I need you to understand something. The bond is not just magic. It is intimate. You will feel my emotions. I will feel yours. Our thoughts will not be private. Our pain shared. It is invasive in ways that go beyond the physical. I understand. Elena did not release his hand. I am choosing this with full knowledge of what it means. Are you? The question caught him off guard. Am I what? Choosing this. Choosing to bond with a woman who hates you, who will question every decision, who will never be a compliant tool. Are you prepared for that, Alpha? Garrett thought about Marcus, about the way his friend had always challenged commands that did not make sense, had pushed back when strategy seemed flawed, had made Garrett a better leader by refusing to simply follow orders. Yes, I am choosing a partner, not a servant. If you challenge me when I am wrong, that makes the bond stronger, not weaker. Then let us begin. Elena released his hand. What does the bonding ceremony require? Normally, the Warden and Alpha stand in the binding circle, while the High Seer performs the ritual. Blood is exchanged, words spoken, magic sealed. Garrett gestured toward the door. But the High Seer left for the capital after you refused. We will need to perform the ritual ourselves. Can we do that without the Seer's magic? The bond is not about the Seer's magic. It is about the Alpha's power and the Warden's bloodline. The ritual just focuses it. We can perform it alone. It will be less formal, possibly more painful without the Seer's dampening effects. But it will work. Elena nodded once. Then let us not delay. Every hour we wait, the barrier weakens further. They made their way to the Great Hall. Warriors had been dismissed, giving them privacy. The binding circle glowed faintly in the torchlight, ancient runes pulsing with anticipation. Garrett and Elena stepped into the circle together. The runes flared brighter, responding to the Alpha's presence. How does this work? Elena asked. I will extend my Alpha power. You will accept it through your bloodline. The barrier magic will recognize the connection and flow through both of us. Garrett hesitated. It will hurt. The magic burns as it forges the link. I am a surgeon. I understand pain. Do it. Garrett extended his hand. Elena took it. The moment their skin touched, power surged between them like lightning given form. Garrett's wolf howled, reaching out to connect. Elena's bloodline answered, magic older than kingdoms rising to meet it. The bond snapped into place. Pain exploded through them both. Not physical, deeper. Magic tearing through barriers that protected the self, forging connection where none existed. Garrett felt Elena's emotions flood through him. Her grief for Marcus, her fury at the system, her determination to change it, her fear that she would fail. And Elena felt his. The crushing guilt of Blackpine, the weight of 6 dead warriors added to 40, the loneliness of being an Alpha who could not afford to show weakness, the desperate hope that maybe this time there could be something different. The barrier responded. Magic poured from Garrett through the bond into Elena and back again, creating a circuit that fed the ancient wards surrounding Iron Ridge. The fortress walls glowed silver. Shadows that had been creeping closer recoiled. The barrier strengthened, pushing back the Shadowland's influence by miles. But the drain was immediate. Garrett felt Elena's life force beginning to feed the barrier, felt her magic being consumed to sustain the wards. At this rate, she had months, maybe a year. Number Garrett poured his own strength into the bond, trying to take the burden himself. The barrier resisted, designed to draw from the Warden, not the Alpha. But he kept pushing, kept forcing his power to shield Elena from the worst of the drain. What are you doing? Elena's voice was strained. Taking as much burden as I can. If we are going to find another way, I need you alive long enough to help me search. The ritual had not included this. Alphas were supposed to let Wardens bear the full cost, but Garrett refused. He forced the bond to accept his offering, sharing the burden equally between them. The pain redoubled. Sharing the load meant both of them suffered what one should have borne. But it also meant Elena would last longer. Long enough, maybe, to find a solution. The binding completed. The circle's glow faded. Garrett and Elena stood facing each other, connected now by magic that would last until one of them died. You are a fool. Elena's voice was shaky. You just cut your own strength in half to protect me. Better we both weaken gradually than you burn out in months. Garrett released her hand, but could still feel her presence at the back of his mind, a constant awareness. Besides, we are partners now. Partners share burdens. Elena looked at him with an expression he could not read. You are nothing like I expected, Alpha Ironhold. Garrett smiled faintly. You can call me Garrett. We are bound now. Formality seems excessive. Garrett, then. She swayed slightly, exhausted from the bonding. I think I need to rest. Let me help you to your chambers. He offered his arm. She took it without argument, too tired to maintain pride. They made their way to the Warden Tower slowly, both of them feeling the new bond settling into place. It was strange, invasive, and yet not entirely unpleasant, like gaining a second shadow that thought independently. At her chamber door, Elena paused. Thank you for giving me a choice, for sharing the burden, for treating me as a person instead of a tool. Thank you for choosing to stay despite having every reason to leave." Garrett's voice was sincere. "I know I cannot replace what you lost, cannot fix what was broken at Black Pine, but I will do everything in my power to make sure this partnership is one you do not regret. We will see, Alpha." Elena's use of his title was deliberate, a reminder that their accord was professional, not personal. "Sleep well." She closed the door. Garrett stood in the hallway for a moment, feeling her presence through the bond. She was exhausted but not afraid, determined but not resigned. And underneath everything, a spark of curiosity. She genuinely wanted to solve this problem, which meant there was hope. Not much, but more than Garrett had felt in a very long time. He made his way back to his own chambers. Dawn was approaching. Another day survived, another small victory against the darkness. But as he lay in bed, feeling Elena's sleeping presence through the bond, Garrett wondered if they had truly won anything, or if they had just bought themselves time before the inevitable. Tomorrow they would begin searching for another way. Tomorrow they would challenge a system 200 years old. Tomorrow the real work began. But tonight, for the first time in 8 years, Garrett fell asleep without nightmares. The bond hummed between them, a thread of silver light in the darkness. And somehow, it made the ghosts feel a little less heavy. Perhaps partnership was its own kind of magic. The bond changed everything and nothing. Garrett woke at dawn as he always did. But now there was a second heartbeat at the edge of his consciousness. Elena, still sleeping in the Warden tower, her presence a warm glow in the back of his mind. Not intrusive, just there. Constant as breathing. He could feel her exhaustion from yesterday's bonding ceremony, the way the barrier pulled at her magic even in sleep. And underneath that, dreams flavored with grief and determination in equal measure. Garrett pushed his own strength through the bond carefully, trying to ease the drain without waking her. The barrier accepted his offering reluctantly, designed to feed primarily on Warden magic. But he forced it, using alpha authority to rewrite rules that had stood for 2 centuries. Elena woke. He felt it through the bond, the shift from sleep to wakefulness, accompanied by a spike of alarm as she remembered where she was and what she had agreed to. "Good morning," Garrett projected the thought, testing the bond's communication ability. A pause. Then, her voice in his mind, sharp and clear. "This is deeply invasive. Can you hear all my thoughts? Number. Only what you project intentionally or feel very strongly. The bond is not mind reading. It is shared awareness. You learn to shield with practice. Good. Because I am having several impolite thoughts about this entire situation, and I would prefer to keep them private." Garrett felt amusement ripple through the bond from her side. She had meant that thought to be private, but the emotion was too strong to contain. He smiled despite himself. "Your impolite thoughts are safe. I promise not to intrude more than the bond requires. See that you do not." Her mental voice softened slightly. "How do you feel?" "The barrier drain? I am bearing half the burden, as agreed." Garrett pulled on his armor, preparing for the day. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been awake for 3 days and run 10 miles. Elena's exhaustion was evident. "Is this normal?" "For the first week after bonding, yes. Your body is adjusting to channeling magic continuously. It becomes easier with time. Easier, but never easy." "No, never easy." They met an hour later in the Great Hall for the morning briefing. Caius had assembled the senior warriors, all of them watching Elena with barely concealed curiosity. A new warden was always significant, but one who had been brought by force and bonded anyway was unprecedented. Elena ignored their stares. She stood beside Garrett at the strategy table like she belonged there, studying the maps with a tactician's eye. "Your eastern approach is vulnerable." She pointed to a pass on the map. "If raiders come through here, they can reach the fortress in half the time as the main road." "We know." Garrett appreciated her directness. "But we lack the warriors to defend both approaches simultaneously. We have to choose where to concentrate our forces. Then you choose wrong." Elena traced a line on the map. "Block the eastern pass completely. Avalanche traps, deadfalls, make it impassable. Force them to the main road where your defenses are strongest." "That would take weeks of work." Caius spoke up, his tone respectful but skeptical. "We do not have the manpower to spare. You do if you stop running pointless patrols in the northern quadrant." Elena's finger moved to another section of the map. This area is within the barrier's strongest point. Nothing gets through here without alerting your wards first. The patrols are redundant. Reassign those warriors to engineering crews. Garrett studied the map. She was right. They had been running patrols out of habit, not strategy. Marcus would have seen it immediately. Make it happen. Garrett looked at Caius. Pull the northern patrols. Start work on the eastern pass blockade. I want it impassable within a fortnight. The young lieutenant saluted. Yes, my lord. Elena continued through the morning briefing, pointing out inefficiencies, suggesting improvements, asking questions that made the senior warriors think about things they had taken for granted. By the end, half of them looked impressed. The other half looked offended that a warden was commenting on military strategy at all. Garrett did not care. She was making them better. That was all that mattered. After the briefing, Elena pulled him aside. We need to discuss my investigation into Haven. Not here. Too many ears. Garrett gestured toward the door. Walk with me. They made their way to the battlements, where the morning wind carried voices away and the barrier's hum provided cover against eavesdropping. Below, warriors moved through their training exercises, the clash of steel on steel, a familiar rhythm. What have you learned about Haven? Garrett kept his voice low. Elena produced a leather folio from her satchel. For 8 years, I have been gathering evidence. Supply manifests showing diverted shipments, financial records proving he profits from shadow magic artifacts, communications between him and raiders who should be enemies, shadow magic artifacts. Garrett's blood went cold. He is selling them? Worse, he is facilitating their creation. Elena opened the folio, showing him documents covered in her precise handwriting. The shadow wolves that attacked yesterday were not natural. They were enhanced, fed power beyond what the Shadowlands normally produce. That requires a conduit. Someone channeling energy from this side of the barrier to the other. A conduit who knows Iron Ridge's defenses, who can weaken the barrier from within. Garrett felt pieces falling into place. The Wardens. He has been sabotaging the Warden bonds. Not just sabotaging, corrupting. Elena's voice went hard. I believe previous Wardens did not simply die from the bond's drain. I believe Haven found a way to corrupt the bond itself, to turn Wardens into conduits for shadow magic rather than protectors against it. The implications were staggering. Every Warden for how long? Years? Decades? Turned into weapons against the very barrier they were meant to sustain? We need proof. Garrett forced himself to think tactically instead of emotionally. Hard evidence we can present to the Capitol. Something that ties Haven directly to shadow magic corruption. I have communications, financial records, but nothing that proves the mechanism. We need to understand how he corrupts the bond. Then we examine the previous Wardens. Garrett made the decision immediately. Their bodies are interred in the crypts beneath the fortress. If Haven turned them into shadow conduits, there will be traces. Corruption does not disappear with death. Can you sense it? Through your alpha magic? I can try. Garrett looked at Elena. But I will need your help. The bond between us is fresh and strong. If we combine our magic, use it to examine the old bonds imprinted on the dead Wardens, we might be able to identify the corruption pattern. That sounds dangerous. It is. If Haven left traps in the old bonds, examining them could trigger a backlash. We could both be hurt. Elena met his eyes. When do we begin? Tonight. After the fortress sleeps. What we find might implicate people still living here. Until we know who to trust, we keep this between us. Agreed. Elena closed her folio. Garrett, if we are right, if Haven has been corrupting Wardens for years, how many people has he killed? Hundreds. Maybe thousands, if you count the damage from weakened barriers allowing shadow creatures through. Garrett's wolf growled beneath his words. He has been committing treason and mass murder for profit. Then we stop him. Not just for ourselves. For every Warden who died thinking they were protecting the kingdom when they were actually being used to destroy it. Garrett felt her fury through the bond, righteous and cold. It matched his own. Yes, we stop him. The day passed in routine tasks that felt anything but routine. Every warrior Garrett interacted with, he found himself wondering, did they know? Were they part of Haven's conspiracy or innocent tools? Trust had been a casualty of Blackpine. Now it felt impossible. Through the bond, he felt Elena's similar paranoia. She worked in the medical wing, treating routine injuries and organizing supplies. But her mind was cataloging people, watching for signs of shadow corruption, building mental lists of who might be compromised. By evening, they were both exhausted from hypervigilance. Garrett met Elena in the Warden Tower after sunset, when the fortress had settled into night watch rotations. "Ready?" he asked. "No, but let us do this anyway." They made their way to the crypts. Ancient stairs spiraled down beneath the fortress, carved from living stone. Torches burned in iron sconces, their light barely pushing back darkness that felt older than the fortress itself. The crypt chamber was vast. Stone sarcophagi lined the walls in precise rows, each bearing a name and dates. The Wardens. 43 women who had died sustaining the barrier over 2 centuries. Garrett led Elena to the most recent burial. Sarah, 19 years old, dead 3 weeks after bonding 15 years ago. He placed his hand on the stone lid. "How do we do this?" Elena asked. "I extend my alpha magic to connect with the remnants of the bond. You channel through our link. Together, we should be able to sense if the bond was corrupted. And if it triggers a trap, then we hope our connection is strong enough to withstand it." Elena placed her hand over his. Their bond flared, magic flowing between them in preparation. Garrett took a breath and reached out with his power. The remnant bond was faint, barely a whisper of what it had been. But it was there, imprinted on Sarah's bones like an echo. Garrett examined it carefully, Elena's presence steadying him through their connection. "There." Elena's mental voice was sharp. "Do you see it? The corruption." Garrett looked closer. The bond should have been silver, pure connection between Alpha and Warden. But threaded through it like poison were black lines. Shadow magic, woven deliberately into the bond structure, growing stronger over time, feeding on Sarah's life force not to sustain the barrier, but to create a conduit. Haven did this. Garrett's voice shook with fury. He deliberately corrupted her bond, turned a 19-year-old girl into a shadow magic pipeline, and she would have felt it. Elena's horror bled through their connection. Would have known something was wrong but been too young, too inexperienced to understand what. "We need to check the others, see how far back this goes." They moved through the crypts systematically. Every warden for the past 30 years showed the same corruption. Black threads woven through silver bonds, shadow magic deliberately introduced and allowed to grow. But the older burials were different. Wardens from 50, 70, 100 years ago showed clean bonds. No corruption. They had died naturally from the barrier's drain, exactly as the system was supposed to work. Haven has been doing this for at least 30 years. Elena's voice was steady despite her rage. Since before he was even on the conclave, he has been planning this corruption for decades. Patient, systematic, building power slowly while appearing to serve the kingdom. Garrett pulled his magic back, severing the connection to the dead bonds. A perfect treason. "We still need to prove how he is doing it. The corruption is clear, but we need the mechanism. How does he alter the bonds?" "He would need access to the bond at its formation." Garrett thought aloud. The conclave seers performed the initial ritual. If Haven corrupted the seers, or created a false seer. Elena's eyes widened. "The high seer who was here yesterday? I thought she left too quickly. Did not even stay to verify the bond took properly. Because she did not care if the bond worked, she only cared that she could corrupt it." Garrett felt the wolf rising, angry and protective. "We need to capture her, force her to testify. She is halfway back to the capital by now." Elena's mind was already calculating. "But if we can prove the seers are compromised, we can demand a full investigation. If the conclave believes us, they have been accepting Haven's version of events for 30 years. Then we make them believe. We have evidence now. The corruption in the old bonds, my financial records, we build an unimpeachable case. And in the meantime, we protect this fortress from the next attack. Because if Haven realizes we are investigating him..." Garrett met Elena's eyes. "He will move against us directly." Elena nodded grimly. "Then we prepare for war on 2 fronts. Shadow creatures from without, traitors from within." They returned to the fortress proper, both hyper-aware now of potential threats. Every shadow could hide an assassin. Every warrior could be compromised. Trust had become a luxury they could not afford. 3 days later, a messenger arrived from the capital. Formal dispatch bearing the conclave seal. Caius brought it to Garrett during the morning briefing, his expression troubled. "My lord, the messenger says this is urgent. From Counselor Haven personally." Garrett broke the seal, Elena reading over his shoulder. The message was brief and courteous. "Alpha Ironhold, I have heard reports of shadow wolf attacks on your fortress. As a demonstration of the conclave's support, I am sending Commander Royce Madden with a relief force of 40 veteran warriors and full supply train. They should arrive within 3 days. May they serve you well in defending the barrier. Counselor Haven. Garrett's blood went cold. Royce, his oldest friend. The warrior who had fought beside him for 15 years before Blackpine. The man who had been conspicuously absent when Garrett needed help getting survivors to safety. The man who had been perfectly positioned to provide intelligence that got Marcus and 40 warriors killed. This is a trap. Elena spoke through their bond rather than aloud. Haven sends your closest friend to determine how much we know, or to finish what Blackpine started. Garrett's hands clenched. Royce was my brother in everything but blood. If he betrayed us, then he stopped being your brother 8 years ago. Elena's voice was firm. And now he is a threat we must neutralize. We do not know for certain he is compromised. Garrett, think tactically. Why would Haven send help now? After years of starving Iron Ridge of supplies? After deliberately weakening the barrier? She gestured at the message. This is not aid. This is infiltration. Garrett knew she was right, but accepting it meant accepting that someone he loved had been lying for years, had been complicit in Marcus's death, had been working for the man who killed Sarah and 7 other wardens under Garrett's protection. The betrayal cut deeper than any shadow wound. We prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Garrett forced himself to think like an alpha, not a friend. When Royce arrives, we watch him carefully. Give him no sensitive information. Keep him away from critical defenses. And if he is here to sabotage the barrier bond? Elena asked. Then we make very sure he does not get close enough to try. Commander Royce Madden arrived exactly 3 days later with 40 warriors, 3 supply wagons, and the kind of easy smile that had always made soldiers follow him into impossible situations. He dismounted in Iron Ridge's courtyard like a man coming home, arms open for the embrace he clearly expected from his oldest friend. Garrett met him at the gate, Elena at his side. The bond hummed with tension between them, both of them analyzing every detail. Royce's posture, the way his eyes flicked to assess the fortress's defenses, the calculation beneath the friendly mask. Royce stopped short when he saw Elena. Surprise flickered across his face before smoothing into careful neutrality. My Lady Voss, I did not expect to find you here. Didn't you? Elena's voice was ice. How curious. The conclave told me my selection was widely known in the capital. I meant no disrespect. Royce recovered smoothly. Only surprised that you accepted the bond, given your feelings about the Warden system. I have my reasons. Elena did not elaborate. Royce turned to Garrett, smile returning. Old friend, you look like death. How long since you slept properly? About 8 years. Garrett embraced Royce briefly, feeling for weapons, for shadow corruption, for anything that might prove betrayal. Found nothing. If Royce was corrupted, he hid it perfectly. Come, let's get your warriors settled. Garrett gestured toward the barracks. We can talk after you have rested from the journey. Actually, I hoped we could talk now. Royce's expression turned serious. I have intelligence about the Shadow Wolf attacks. Information Haven wanted you to have immediately. Then let us retire to my study. Garrett led the way, feeling Elena's presence through the bond. She had positioned herself to observe Royce from behind, watching for tells. In the study, Royce waited until the door closed before speaking. Garrett, I know about Blackpine, about what really happened. Garrett's wolf went very still. What do you mean? I mean, I know the intelligence was deliberately falsified. I know Marcus and his warriors were sent into a trap. Royce's voice was low and urgent. I have been investigating for years, trying to find who was responsible. And what did you find? Garrett kept his voice neutral. Haven. Royce pulled documents from his jacket. I have proof he has been selling shadow magic artifacts to raiders, weakening the barrier deliberately, profiting from chaos. Garrett took the documents. They looked authentic. Financial records, communications, everything they would need to build a case against Haven. Too perfect. Elena's voice in his mind. If he really had this evidence, why did he not bring it sooner? Good question. Garrett handed the documents back. This is excellent work, Royce. But tell me, if you have had this evidence for years, why wait until now to bring it? Royce's expression flickered, just for a moment, then smoothed. Because I needed to be certain. Accusations against a counselor require absolute proof. And you have that now? Yes. With your testimony about Blackpine added to my evidence, we can bring Haven down. Garrett felt the trap closing. Royce wanted his testimony. Wanted to know how much Garrett knew and what evidence he had gathered. This was reconnaissance disguised as alliance. I see. Garrett moved to the window, showing his back deliberately, testing whether Royce would attack. A foolish move if Royce was loyal, a perfect opportunity if he was not. Royce did not attack. Too smart for that. His mission was information gathering, not assassination. There is something else you should know. Royce's voice took on a warning tone. The Conclave is concerned about your Warden bond. They think you may be compromised. Compromised how? Elena spoke for the first time, her voice sharp. They think Garrett took pity on you because of Marcus. That he weakened the bond to spare you from the full drain. That this mercy has weakened the barrier. Who thinks this? Garrett turned from the window. Who on the Conclave questions my bond? Royce hesitated, just for a heartbeat. Haven. He wanted me to assess the situation. Determine if the barrier's weakness is due to sentiment rather than shadow attack. And what will you report back to Haven? Elena's voice cut like a blade. Royce looked at her directly. That the barrier is strong, that Garrett knows his duty, that Haven's concerns are unfounded. The lie was smooth, practiced. Garrett felt sick. This was Royce, his brother, the man who had saved his life at Second Ridge, who had stood beside him at Marcus's funeral, who had known Garrett's every strategy and weakness for 15 years, and who now served the man who killed Marcus and corrupted 7 Wardens. Thank you for your honesty, Royce. Garrett forced warmth into his voice. And thank you for bringing supplies. We are dangerously low on several critical items. Of course. Anything for Iron Ridge. Royce smiled. We are brothers, Garrett. We protect each other. Always. Garrett clasped Royce's shoulder, feeling the betrayal like knives in his chest. Get some rest. We will talk more tomorrow. After Royce left, Elena spoke aloud. He is Haven's creature. Every word was lies wrapped in truth. I know. Garrett sat heavily in his chair. I felt it through the bond, the calculation, the false concern. He is here to assess our defenses and determine how much we know. What do? We give him false information. Let him think we suspect nothing. Meanwhile, we gather evidence against him. When we move against Haven, we take down everyone in his network, including your oldest friend. Garrett met her eyes. Including my oldest friend. He stopped being my brother when he helped murder Marcus. Now he is just another enemy. Through the bond, Elena felt his grief, the cost of this betrayal. She moved closer, her hand finding his shoulder. I am sorry, I know what this cost you. No more than it cost Marcus, or Sarah, or any of the others Haven killed. Garrett stood, pushing grief aside in favor of duty. We protect the fortress, we build our case, and when the time is right, we destroy Haven and everyone who serves him. Even if that includes Royce? Especially if that includes Royce. Betrayal demands justice. The next 3 days were a delicate dance. Royce integrated his warriors seamlessly with Iron Ridge's defenders. Too seamlessly. He knew the fortress's rhythms because he had been here before, years ago, during the time when he and Garrett served together. Now that knowledge became a weapon. Garrett watched him through the bond's enhanced awareness, sharing observations with Elena. The way Royce paid too much attention to the Warden Tower. How he asked casual questions about the barrier's strength. His interest in Elena's movements and routines. He is looking for a way to corrupt our bond. Elena's voice was grim. Same as Haven did to previous Wardens. We do not give him the opportunity. Garrett had doubled guards around the Warden Tower, posted warriors loyal to Chaos, who he trusted absolutely at key positions. On the 4th night, Garrett woke to Elena's scream echoing through the bond. Not sound. Pure telepathic agony. He was moving before conscious thought, wolf speed carrying him across the fortress to the Warden Tower. Caius and a dozen warriors followed, weapons drawn. They found Elena on the floor of her chamber, writhing in pain. Shadow magic burned through their bond, corrupting the silver connection with black poison. And standing over her, hands still glowing with dark power, was Royce. Get away from her. Garrett's voice was barely human, the wolf rising to dominance. Royce turned slowly, no longer bothering to hide. I am sorry, old friend, but Haven pays too well to let sentiment interfere. He offered me wealth, power, and an early retirement if I could corrupt this bond before you found a way to break the Warden cycle. So you were going to kill her? Garrett's claws extended. Just like you helped kill Marcus. Marcus was a tactical necessity. As is this. Royce's blade appeared in his hand. Nothing personal, Garrett. Just business. They fought. Not brothers anymore, not friends, just two warriors trying to kill each other with everything they had. Royce was faster, enhanced by shadow magic that should not have been possible for a normal warrior. But Garrett fought with alpha rage and the desperation of protecting his warden. Each strike carried the weight of 8 years of grief, 40 dead warriors, and 7 corrupted bonds. Their blades met with sounds like thunder. Royce's shadow magic against Garrett's alpha power, darkness against fury. But Garrett was not alone. Through the bond, Elena poured what strength she had left, her magic flowing to reinforce him. And more than that, she identified the corruption Royce had introduced. Surgical precision finding the exact points where shadow threads connected to their bond. Caius! Elena's voice was strained but clear. Silver blade, cut here! She indicated a point in the air where shadow magic connected Royce to their bond. The young lieutenant moved without hesitation. His silver blade sliced through invisible threads. Royce screamed as his connection severed, shadow magic backlashing into him. Garrett did not give him time to recover. His blade found Royce's throat. One strike. Clean. Final. His oldest friend died with a look of surprise, like he could not believe Garrett would actually do it. Garrett knelt beside Elena immediately, checking the bond. The corruption Royce had introduced was extensive, but not complete. She had fought it, using her surgical knowledge of how bonds worked to isolate the shadow magic before it could spread fully. Are you all right? He helped her sit up, supporting her weight. No, but I will survive. Elena's voice was shaky. He tried to do what Haven did to the others. Turn me into a shadow conduit, but our bond is different, stronger. The corruption could not take root as quickly, because we share the burden equally. The bond resists corruption when both partners are invested. Exactly. Elena looked at Royce's body. We need to examine him. If Haven gave him the ability to corrupt bonds, there will be artifacts, tools, evidence we can use. They searched Royce's quarters, found exactly what Elena predicted. Shadow magic artifacts, corruption tools, and documents detailing 30 years of Warden assassinations disguised as natural bond failures. Everything they needed to destroy Haven. But first, they had to survive the immediate threat. Royce had brought 40 warriors. Some were innocent, but others, the senior officers, showed signs of shadow corruption when Caius tested them with silver and blessed water. Traitors, 8 of them. Warriors who had been turned by Haven's promises of power and wealth. Garrett gave them a choice: confess and face trial, or resist and die here. 6 chose confession. 2 chose to fight. They died quickly, their shadow magic no match for Garrett's rage. By dawn, Iron Ridge had 8 prisoners and evidence that would shake the kingdom to its foundations. Garrett stood on the walls, watching the sun rise, feeling Elena's presence through their bond. We did it! Her mental voice was tired but triumphant. We have proof. We can expose Haven. At what cost? Garrett thought of Royce's body in the crypts, of 8 years of friendship revealed as lies. My oldest friend betrayed me for gold, and mine died because I was not there to protect him. Elena's presence wrapped around his mind like an embrace. We have both paid prices we should never have owed. But now we make sure no one else pays them. How? We take this evidence to the Capitol. We demand a full conclave investigation. We expose every person Haven has corrupted. Elena's determination burned through the bond. And then we break this warden system permanently. Find a way to sustain the barrier without sacrificing women. You really think we can? I think we have to try. Because the alternative is accepting that this corruption will continue forever. Garrett felt hope stir for the first time in years. Not the desperate hope of last stands. The real hope of genuine change. Then we do it together. Partners. Partners. Elena agreed. Now come down from that wall. You have been brooding long enough. We have a case to build and a kingdom to save. Garrett smiled despite everything. Yes, Warden. Do not make me come up there and drag you down myself. You could try. Her laughter echoed through the bond, bright and unexpected. It was the first time Garrett had felt her truly happy since the bonding. The sound made something in his chest unclench. Maybe they could actually do this. Maybe partnership was stronger than corruption. Maybe hope was not foolish when 2 people carried it together. He descended from the wall to begin the real work. Not of fighting shadow wolves, but of changing a system that had murdered innocents for 200 years. It would not be easy. It would probably be impossible. But with Elena beside him, Garrett was willing to try. The march to the capital took 5 days through mountain passes that grew easier as the barrier strengthened. With Royce's corruption purged from the bond, Garrett and Elena's connection hummed with power that fed the wards naturally. The barrier expanded for the first time in 30 years, pushing shadow influence back mile by mile. But they were not marching alone. 2 days into the journey, scouts reported movement. A large force approaching from the north. Raiders, by the banners, led by Dreadlord Varric himself. Garrett called a halt, his warriors forming defensive positions. Elena stood beside him, their bond allowing wordless coordination. Both of them were tense, ready for battle. Varric approached under a white flag, his massive form unmistakable even at distance. 7 feet of muscle and scarred leather armor. The wolf skull helmet that had terrified 3 kingdoms. But his hands were empty of weapons, and his posture suggested negotiation, not combat. "Alpha Ironhold!" Varric's voice boomed across the space between them. "I would speak with you. Parley, under truce of the ancient codes." "Speak, then." Garrett did not lower his guard. "But be brief. We have business in the capital that will not wait. As do I." Varric removed his helmet, revealing a face more human than Garrett expected. Scarred and weathered, but intelligent. "This is about Haven." "What about him?" "He betrayed me. Just as he betrayed you." Varric's expression was cold fury. "For 15 years, I have raided Iron Ridge's territory on his orders. He paid me in shadow magic artifacts and promised me lands when the barrier finally fell. Said the Conclave would grant me legitimacy if I helped weaken the Alpha's hold on the north." "And you believed him?" Elena's voice was sharp. "I am a mercenary, my lady. I believe whoever pays the best." Varric inclined his head respectfully. "But Haven stopped paying 3 months ago, kept demanding more raids while providing fewer resources. When I sent demands for payment, he sent assassins instead." "Let me guess. Elena's surgical mind was working. The assassins failed, and you decided to investigate why a counselor would try to kill his own hired raider." "Exactly." Varric's smile was predatory. "What I found was interesting. Shadow magic requires living conduits. Haven has been using corrupted wardens as his primary sources, but he needed secondary channels to distribute the power. People who could carry artifacts without dying immediately. You." Garrett understood. He was using you and your raiders as unwitting mules for shadow corruption. Not so unwitting by the end. But yes. Varric gestured to his warriors, 100 strong, all showing signs of shadow taint. "We are dying, Alpha. The corruption Haven gave us is eating us from within. We have perhaps 6 months before it kills us all. And you want us to heal you?" Elena's tone was skeptical. "Why would we help the raiders who have killed our people for 15 years? Because we have information you need." Varric pulled documents from his armor. Haven's entire network, names, locations, methods, everyone who has been helping him corrupt wardens and profit from shadow magic. He also pulled out a vial of black liquid. And this, the corruption source, the actual substance he uses to twist warden bonds. Garrett and Elena exchanged glances through the bond. "This changed everything." "Why bring this to us?" Garrett asked. "You could use it as leverage with the Conclave. Sell the information to the highest bidder." "Because I am a warrior, not a merchant." Varric's voice went hard. "Haven dishonored our contract, tried to kill me and my men when we were no longer useful. I want justice, not profit. And you are the only ones with the power to deliver it." "Justice means facing trial for your raids," Elena stated flatly. "For the warriors you have killed. You understand that?" "I do." Varric nodded. "My men and I will accept judgment for our actions, but only after Haven faces judgment for his. The architect of this corruption should fall before his tools do." Garrett considered. Everything Varric said rang true. The bond with Elena let him sense deception, and he felt none from the Dreadlord, just fury and a mercenary's sense of honor. "We have an accord." Garrett extended his hand. "You provide evidence and testimony against Haven. In return, we will attempt to purge the corruption from you and your men. After Haven falls, you face trial for your raids. Fair?" Varric clasped Garrett's forearm in the warrior's grip. "Fair, Alpha. Though I should warn you, purging this corruption will not be easy. It has had months to take root. Then we start with the ones who are least corrupted and develop a treatment protocol." Elena's surgeon mind was already working. I will need to examine the corruption closely, understand its structure. You may examine me first. Varric bared his arm, showing black veins spiderwebbing under his skin. I am the most corrupted. If your treatment kills me, my men know to honor our agreement anyway. Elena took his arm, her magic flowing through her touch as she examined the shadow corruption. Garrett felt her analysis through the bond, the careful way she mapped the corruption structure. This is sophisticated. Her voice held reluctant admiration. Haven did not just introduce shadow magic, he wove it into your life force, so removing it without killing you would be nearly impossible. Nearly. But not completely. Varric's eyes held desperate hope. You are the warden who survived corruption. If anyone can reverse this, it is you. I survived because my alpha bears half the burden. Elena glanced at Garrett. And because we caught it early. Yours has had months. But, her expression turned determined. I will try. They made camp that night in a valley where the barrier's strength made shadow creatures unable to approach. Garrett's warriors and Varric's raiders maintained wary distance, but no weapons were drawn. Both groups understood they faced a common enemy now. Elena worked through the night, examining the corruption in Varric's men, developing theories. Garrett watched her through the bond, feeling her frustration mount with each failure. The shadow magic resisted every attempt at removal, woven too deeply to extract without killing the host. Finally, near dawn, she called Garrett to her workspace. I have an idea, but it is dangerous. Most good ideas are. What do you need? Your alpha power. Specifically, the way it channels through our bond to sustain the barrier. Elena's eyes were bright with exhausted insight. The barrier works by using alpha power filtered through Warden magic to hold back shadow corruption. What if we reverse that? Use Warden magic filtered through alpha power to burn out corruption already inside someone. You want to use our bond as a weapon, as a scalpel. She pointed to complex diagrams she had drawn. If I channel my purging magic through your alpha power, it should be strong enough to burn out shadow corruption without killing the host. In theory. In theory. Garrett studied the diagrams. And in practice? In practice, we have no idea. But the alternative is letting 100 warriors die slowly over the next 6 months, so we try. They started with Varric. If anyone could survive experimental magic, it would be the Dreadlord whose enhanced constitution had kept him alive this long. Garrett placed his hands on Varric's shoulders, channeling alpha power. Elena placed her hands over Garrett's, her warden magic flowing through the connection. The bond between them blazed, silver light pouring through Garrett into Varric. The shadow corruption fought back. Black veins bulged, resisting purification. Varric screamed, his body convulsing. But Garrett held firm, and Elena adjusted her magic with surgical precision, targeting corruption without destroying healthy tissue. For 5 minutes that felt like hours, they burned. Then suddenly, the corruption shattered. Black smoke poured from Varric's mouth and nose, dissipating in the dawn light. The Dreadlord collapsed, unconscious but breathing. His veins, when Elena checked them, ran red again. Clean. It worked. Garrett felt his own exhaustion, but pushed it aside. How many can we treat before we collapse? If we take turns resting? Elena calculated. Maybe 20 per day. It will take 5 days to treat everyone. Then we have 5 days before we can march on the capital. Garrett looked at Varric's unconscious form. Worth it if we gain 100 allies and evidence against Haven. Elena nodded wearily. Let us hope the Conclave waits that long before moving against us. But the Conclave did not wait. On the 3rd day of treatments, as they purged corruption from the 30th Raider, a messenger arrived from the capital. Conclave colors, official dispatch. Garrett broke the seal with a sense of dread that proved justified. Alpha Garrett Ironhold and Warden Elena Voss. You are hereby summoned to appear before the full conclave to answer charges of bond corruption, unauthorized alliance with enemy raiders, and conspiracy against Counselor Haven. Failure to appear within 3 days will result in your arrest and the seizure of Iron Ridge Fortress. By order of High Counselor Merrick. They know. Elena's voice through the bond was grim. Haven must have sent word that we are investigating him. Or someone in our group is a spy. Garrett looked at the assembled warriors and raiders. Not everyone here is trustworthy. Either way, we are out of time. If we do not appear, they brand us traitors, and everything we have learned becomes suspect testimony. Then we appear, with all our evidence, all our witnesses, and we force the conclave to hear the truth. Garrett's voice carried alpha authority. Caius, The young lieutenant appeared immediately. "My lord, send riders ahead. Inform the conclave we will appear as summoned, but with 100 witnesses and evidence that will shake the kingdom. Tell them to prepare for a trial that exposes 30 years of treason." Caius saluted. "And if they refuse? Then we give them no choice. We make this public. Every citizen in the capital will hear what Haven has done." The forced march to the capital took 2 days of brutal travel. Garrett pushed his warriors and Varric's raiders to their limits, both groups united now by shared purpose. They reached the capital at dawn on the 3rd day, exhausted but ready. The city gates stood open, but guarded by conclave soldiers, who looked nervous at the sight of an alpha, a warden, and 100 armed warriors approaching together. "We are expected." Garrett's voice carried absolute confidence. "Take us to the high conclave chamber." They were escorted through streets that emptied as word spread. An alpha and a dreadlord walking side by side. A warden who should have been dying but blazed with health and power. The people stared and whispered. This was unprecedented. The high conclave chamber was a vast circular room with seats rising in tiers. Every counselor was present. 30 men and women who governed the kingdom, their expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility. And at the center, in the seat of honor, sat Counselor Haven. He looked exactly as Garrett remembered. Distinguished silver hair, expensive robes, the face of a man who had built his career on trust and competence. The face of a traitor who had murdered hundreds. "Alpha Ironhold," Haven's voice was measured. "You have brought an unusual retinue to answer simple charges. The charges are not simple, and the truth requires witnesses." Garrett stepped forward, Elena at his side, Varric behind them. "We are here to answer accusations of corruption, and to bring far graver accusations against you, Counselor Haven." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. The High Counselor Merrick called for order. "This is highly irregular. You cannot simply accuse a sitting counselor without evidence." "We have evidence." Elena's voice cut through the noise. 30 years of it. She presented their case methodically. Financial records showing Haven's profits from shadow magic. Communications proving he hired Varric to attack Iron Ridge. Medical examinations of corrupted Warden remains. Testimony from Varric about Haven's betrayal. The corruption vial that proved how bonds were twisted. Each piece built on the last, undeniable, damning. Haven's expression never changed. He listened with the calm of a man who had expected this and prepared accordingly. When Elena finished, he rose. "These accusations are baseless. Yes, I profited from shadow magic trade, but that was sanctioned by this conclave as a means of understanding our enemy. Yes, I hired raiders, but as double agents to infiltrate shadow cultists. Everything I did was in service to the kingdom." He turned to face Garrett directly. "And you, Alpha, you dare bring accusations when you yourself have violated the sacred Warden bond? You shared the burden meant for the Warden alone, weakening our most important defense out of misplaced sentiment. The burden sharing makes the bond stronger, not weaker." Garrett's voice was steady. "The barrier has expanded for the first time in 30 years since Elena and I bonded as equals. Because you corrupted the natural order!" Haven's mask cracked slightly, showing the fanatic beneath. "The Warden system requires sacrifice, one life for thousands. You weaken that by making it a partnership." "So you admit it." Elena stepped forward. "You believe Wardens should be sacrifices, tools to be used and discarded. I believe in protecting the kingdom by any means necessary." Haven's voice rose. "If that requires women to give their lives sustaining the barrier, so be it. If that requires shadow magic to understand our enemies, so be it. I have kept this kingdom safe for 30 years through hard choices squeamish fools like you refuse to make." The chamber went silent. "Hard choices." Garrett's voice was cold. "Is that what you call murdering 19-year-old Sarah? Corrupting her bond so she died in 3 weeks instead of 3 years? She was weak. Her bloodline insufficient. Haven did not even try to hide it now. I simply accelerated the inevitable and gained useful data about corruption resistance in the process." "Data." Elena's fury blazed through the bond. "You tortured a girl to death for data. I saved the kingdom!" Haven's composure shattered completely. "Every warden I corrupted gave me insights into shadow magic. Every raider attack I orchestrated taught us enemy tactics. Every sacrifice I made was for the greater good." "You made no sacrifices." Garrett's alpha power filled the chamber, making even the counselors lean back. "You sent others to die while you grew rich and powerful. That is not leadership. That is cowardice dressed in patriotism." Haven pulled a vial from his robes, the same black corruption liquid from Varric's evidence. Then let me show you true sacrifice. He drank it, all of it, enough corruption to kill a dozen men instantly. His body convulsed. Black veins erupted across his skin. Shadow smoke poured from his eyes and mouth. But he did not die. Instead, the corruption transformed him, enhanced him, fed by 30 years of stolen Warden magic stored in artifacts he had hidden throughout the chamber. Haven became something else, no longer human, a creature of shadow and stolen power. The corruption was a trap. Elena realized through the bond. He planned this. Knew if we exposed him, he would ascend to shadow form using all the magic he has stolen. Then we stop him before the transformation completes. Garrett drew his sword. Caius Varric, evacuate the counselors. This is not their fight. The battle that followed was chaos. Haven's shadow form tore through the chamber with claws that shredded stone. Garrett met him with alpha fury, sword blazing with barrier magic. Elena channeled power through their bond, her warden magic purging shadow corruption wherever it touched. Varric and his raiders joined the fight, their recent purging making them resistant to Haven's corruption attempts. They fought not for pay, but for justice, for the lives Haven had stolen. The battle raged through the chamber and spilled into the streets beyond. Citizens fled as two former allies tried to kill each other with everything they had. Haven was powerful, stronger than any shadow creature Garrett had faced. But he was also arrogant. He had spent 30 years corrupting others while remaining in safety. He did not know how to fight against someone willing to sacrifice everything. Garrett did. He had lost Marcus, lost 40 warriors, lost 7 wardens. He would not lose Elena or let Haven escape. Now! Elena shouted through the bond. She had been using the fight to position Haven exactly where she needed him, at the intersection of 3 major ley lines that powered the capital's wards. Garrett drove Haven back with a combination attack. The Dreadlord's shadow form stumbled onto the ley line nexus. Elena triggered every ward simultaneously. Barrier magic designed to repel shadow corruption blazed upward in a column of silver light. Haven screamed as purification burned through him. His stolen power, his shadow form, his corruption all incinerated. When the light faded, only ash remained. Counselor Haven was dead. The aftermath took weeks to sort through. The conclave investigated and discovered that Haven's corruption extended to 5 other counselors, a dozen seers, and countless bureaucrats. All were arrested. All faced trial. The Warden system was abolished. Elena's testimony about the corruption and Garrett's demonstration of the partnership bond convinced even the most traditional counselors that change was necessary. A new system was proposed. Wardens would still be needed to help channel alpha power into the barrier. But they would serve 5-year terms, not life sentences. They would work as partners with alphas, sharing the burden equally. They would be honored, not sacrificed. Elena was offered the position of Warden General, overseeing the new system. She accepted on the condition that Garrett served as Alpha Commander, working alongside her. They returned to Iron Ridge together. The fortress needed rebuilding. The barrier needed maintenance. The North needed leaders who understood both duty and compassion. On the first morning back, they stood on the walls watching dawn break over mountains that looked less hostile now. The barrier hummed around them, silver and strong. "Do you ever regret it?" Elena asked through their bond. "Choosing partnership over tradition?" "Every day." Garrett's mental voice was warm. "It is harder, more complicated, requires me to think instead of just following orders. But it is better, for both of us, for everyone who depends on the barrier." He took her hand. "Partnership is harder than sacrifice. It is also worth more." Elena squeezed his hand. "Marcus would have been proud of you, of what you built here." "We built it, not just me." "True," she smiled, "though I did most of the work." Garrett laughed, the sound echoing across the courtyard where warriors trained, and the medical wing saved lives, and the whole fortress buzzed with the energy of renewal. In the crypts beneath them, Sarah and 7 other corrupted wardens had been given new memorials, not sacrifices anymore, victims. Their names remembered not for what they gave willingly, but for what was stolen from them. Never again would Iron Ridge ask for sacrifice without offering partnership in return. Never again would alphas use wardens as tools. Never again would the barrier demand more than both parties agreed to give. It was not a perfect system, but it was better than what came before. And sometimes, better was enough. The wolf's last stand had not ended in death, but in transformation. Not in glory, but in partnership. Not in sacrifice, but in the hard work of building something worth protecting. And two people who had every reason to hate each other found instead that they could build something neither could have created alone. The barrier stood strong. The kingdom was safe. And for the first time in 200 years, the price of that safety did not require women to burn their lives away into ash. That was worth more than any legend. END